It's the Believe in Texans podcast, and I am really lucky to be joined today by Moose Johnston, a man who needs no introduction, especially because aside from your football career, Moose, this is 2 weeks in a row you're going to be doing a Texans game here in Houston. So I enjoyed the broadcast because I watched it in person. I got to go home, and you said a few things that I want to touch on when we're in here. But I know we got to talk about quarterbacks. I know we got to talk about both of these really good defenses. But as a former fullback yourself, that wham block by British Brooks must have been the highlight of your day.
Yeah, that was a good one. There was one a couple of weeks ago, but the nose caught him right at the last second and got down a little bit on him, and he probably took the brunt of it. But yeah, British did a really nice job. Finished him, got him right on his back and everything. So that's. And it doesn't matter when you get one of those people say, well, he didn't even see you coming. It's still hard to do. So
it's hard to, I was a defensive tackle, so I'm sitting there, I'm watching. I'm like, no, he's not. That's a dangerous person right there. You got to be aware of him. What are you doing? I feel like every year there's a discussion about fullbacks making a comeback. And with the Texans this year, they really started, all offseason long, they were talking about imposing a physical presence on the offensive line, really hammering the double teams and everything. And I feel like we've seen it in fits and starts. But one of the things about that game was that they flat out, they played with 6 offensive linemen a bunch of the time. Yeah. And, Blake Fisher was in there, I think, on about a third of the snaps is that tight end, offensive tackle playing tight end. We've been wondering this week, is that, like, how much can they really lean into that versus just using it in specific game plans?
I think you get a good idea of that just from Kyle Shanahan and what they had done the week before against Atlanta and then what they did against Houston. I think a defense presents certain problems. And then when you take that and kind of wrap it around, all 3 phases of the game and what style of football game are you going to have to play? What kind of game plan do you want to design? I don't think Kyle felt very comfortable in getting into a 35 plus or a 40 plus carry type of game. He was conflicted. Is this going to be a 9-6? Can we create some big shot opportunities down the field and capitalize on a couple like Seattle was able to do the week before? I think it was really hard for him to figure that out. So I think when you see what they did last week against San Francisco's defensive line, that's a group that's missing 3 of their top edge rushers. You got some young guys inside. They got beat up during the course of the game. So yeah, at a certain point, just stay with it. Maybe it was only supposed to be, that small, complementary component on the offensive side of the ball, but because they were having so much success with it and it was such a good matchup, why leave it? And that was Norv Turner for us in Dallas. If he found a play that was working, he was going to keep using it. And I tell people all the time, go back to our second Super Bowl in Atlanta against the Bills, Super Bowl 28. At the start of the second half, we're down 13-6 or 13-7. And it looks like the exact same play, just left, right, all the way down the field. Well, that's exactly what it was. They had done a really nice job in the first half of stuffing our run with some stunts that they were using up front. And we figured, okay, we'll go back and we'll run this play. And eventually they have to get out of it. And Buffalo never got out of it. So we just kept running that same play all the way down the field. And once you get into that rhythm and you have that confidence, it's really great to let the offensive line and the tight end, the fullback really kind of feed off that energy.
Yeah, and it was nice to see. The one thing you said in the broadcast that I was really pleased to hear, and you kind of stressed it as the game went along, was CJ told you in the production meetings, man, on first and second down especially, I gotta get the simple stuff right. I gotta get the easy stuff done. And in that game, it unfolded that way. That the defense basically challenged him, hey, can you be the kind of quarterback that has a 12 or a 13 or a 14 play drive and just methodically work your way down the field? And he did. And we're trying to figure out, okay, is it a 1 week thing, or is it because the 49ers defense was banged up, or did it look like CJ took a real step forward in that regard?
I think if you watch his decision-making and you watch his feet, it was very different than it was against Seattle. Probably not as drastic as in some of the other games, because you had the Tennessee game and the Baltimore game, leading up to that, where the offense played well. I didn't really dig into a lot of the early games, those first 3 weeks. But there were some times where, that was the best I had seen him play. And then when you got to the end of the game overall, I think by far it was the best that he played. And I just don't understand why it's hard for him to do that, right? You hear it from a lot of coaches, hey, take the boring play. Or you hear it from the backup quarterback who's kind of that veteran guy behind a younger guy. Hey, just take the boring play, right? Stay ahead of schedule, keep the chains moving. They may make you do a methodical drive down the field, like you said, 10 plays, 12 plays. And that's what they were doing. If your opening drive is 16 plays, you just had a huge boost of confidence that we can function in this way, if that's what we have to do here this afternoon. And they go on and do it 4 more times, during the course of that game. So it was really, really impressive. But I always wonder why it's hard for them to do that on a regular basis, because so much so that, right, the Fangio defense is now all over the NFL.
Yeah.
Because they want to test the patience of the quarterback.
I thought the play in the game that I got really excited about for what it might mean to CJ's development was the Woody Marks 50-yard reception, because that was classic. All right, the routes downfield, they were developing, they were coming, but it was just as the pass protection was breaking down. But because the defense had bit on the play action so hard and CJ hit the check down in rhythm, and quickly, Woody Marks had all that room to run, because that's kind of that injection of confidence that, hey, if you hit enough of the little stuff, it can turn into bigger stuff.
Yeah, well, we kind of read some of the things that he said about, Coach Caley's offense and how he interpreted death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah.
That's the great example, right? It's a play that you drop down to your outlet and you're hoping to get 8 yards and you get 50. And it was great to hear D'Amico talk about, how excited he was, because it was a check down and you see all the wide receivers kind of, rally into that area and really start to work downfield. That's something special. And that's a huge part of what that coaching tree has taught their offenses. And so while he's in San Francisco, D'Amico's going to get to see, the Brandon Ayuks and the Deebo Samuels working downfield. I mean, as good as they are as receivers, they are fearless physical blockers, in the second level, and all the really, really good teams that we're seeing this year, had Indianapolis twice, their wide receiver group are really good blockers, in that secondary. The Rams, always have had great blockers, downfield. The Lions, maybe the best there is in the NFL right now. And that's, you get a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs and a 5-yard pass turns into a 60-yard touchdown because everybody rallies to him and gets great blocks down the field.
Looking at this Broncos defense, look, I know how good Pat Surtain is. The opening line on this game on FanDuel was the Broncos favored by 1.5. Pat Surtain is announced as being out, and all of a sudden the line swings to Texans 1.5. And usually a non-quarterback won't swing the line that much. But everything, after having watched their defense some this week, everything, so much of what they do is based on Surtain being able to lock down the number one receiver, and then they can blitz and play man coverage. Is it that much bigger of a loss than just normally even a really good cornerback leaving? I feel like the Broncos defense really hinges on Pat Surtain.
They're very good, but Patrick makes them, exceptional. Exactly what you just said. The ability to have somebody that can lock down Jamar Chase, can lock down whoever your number one is considered to be. And to have that guy opposite him in Riley Moss, who you feel comfortable putting on number two, because that a lot of times is one of the things where a coach who's done that in the past won't do that because he doesn't feel that matchup is good, even with a little bit of help over the top. He just feels, it's best for us to just kind of spin that dial during the course of the day. Let him play right and left. If he's coming this side, we're gonna take him. If he goes the other side, we have confidence in our guy on that side, to be able to cover him. And maybe you get a little bit of help over the top in that situation. But I can't remember which defensive coordinator it was, but we asked him and we pressed him on it a little bit because he had done it quite a bit throughout his earlier career. And he goes, I don't have that guy opposite right now. I don't really have the depth across the back end where I feel I can do that. I've got one great corner, but I don't have the other pieces in the secondary that I've had in the past where you feel comfortable doing that because it really stresses the other guys and they're just not quite there yet. So you've got Vance Joseph, who's somebody that really kind of buys into that. And he's got a guy like Patrick Surtain. But then he also has to have those other 3 pieces or 4 pieces when you get into the nickel where you feel confident you can do that. And when you do that, it allows that defense to become so much more complex in the front in what they're doing. And that's going to be the biggest thing for CJ this week is first and second down are okay, but boy, you better have your thinking caps on third down, and you better be able to communicate. One of the things that I think they're very, very good at is a lot of guys come up and they give you that mug look, and you got the guys walking around and which one of the 7 or which one of the 8s are blitzing and which ones are dropping. Yeah. They give you a couple steps into the line and then they pull back.
Yeah.
So they make it as hard as anybody I've seen in the league. There's a bunch of teams. Minnesota's very similar when you watch them, but I don't think anybody does it quite as well as Denver does.
Yeah, and I think that's and then there's times too where it's just flat out. I get my old man grumpiness sometimes comes where they don't make a distinction between a blitz and a dog on some of the pass the pass rush stats. So they'll say, oh, the Broncos blitz so much or this amount of time. And a lot of those things that they're classifying as blitzes is just, all right, it's a 3-4 defense and an under front, and they're rushing those 5 guys. And they're just winning one-on-one matchups. And that's where, Ariante Ursary, is had his best game probably he's had as a pro, but I feel like this is another measuring stick game for him at left tackle to see exactly what he is now and, whether he's improved over the first part of the season.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because everything is inside, everything's guard, center, guard, and you get Jonathan Cooper and Nick Benito on the outside, and your count and your confusion comes inside tackle to inside tackle. So you've got those guys all focused there. So they put those guys, the tackles end up getting put on islands quite a bit.
Yeah.
And everything that's just, the twisting and the counting. And, I thought he was coming. Oh, no, it was that guy. And now you're already out of position. He's on your upfield shoulder. So technique, and I heard everybody with the Texans talking about technique coming out of Seattle. This is another one of those games where you've got to be really, really good with your technique. Your communication has got to be outstanding. You can't get on different levels because they are going to twist and be able to pass a game. You've got to be on the same level. So that's one of the areas that they've struggled with for a while now. And that's communication, technique, staying on the same level, really bumping your guy to let him know that, hey, he's coming your way. And so it's one of the things that our line was really, really good at. And I was always amazed how they could form that cup, and they were but they were still on that same level. The guard, center, guard area, when you were twisted on them, man, I mean, some of the collisions that they had with each other were as violent as some of the collisions you could see with the opponents.
What it was?
Really, really good at recognizing those games and passing them back.
Those guys, your guys, they were good at recognizing it, but then they were just so strong. Like it would look like a defensive lineman might think he had an edge on Larry Allen or something, but Larry would just, he was stable. He had his shoulders square, and he would just he'd punch a guy and take all the juice out of him. Very frustrating.
Never underestimate the ability to recover. It's such a great skill, and I think our whole 5, they were all good players, but man, they could recover. Like Mark Stepnowski was, I'd see him in places where he didn't get, they didn't get a good bump, and he took one. He's got that guy that's picking him, and he's got him off balance, and boom, set right back and get right in front of him. And you watch the film.
He was like a martial artist. Yeah, no, he was you remember the movie Jim Cotta? Really bad movie, but he was like a Jim Cotta type of guy. He was just, it didn't make any sense. Bo Nix, we haven't talked about Bo Nix. Just give me the sum total of, all right, where is he? And is he is he as good as he is in the fourth quarter of these games?
Yeah, right.
Or is it just inconsistency at this point?
I think they're still growing together. It's going to take a while for him and Sean to really kind of hit their stride. It's been funny. We've had a couple of situations, and it's really what Coach Cayley's going through right now. It's year 1. I mean, when we had, we kind of talked about this. We talk about it in Dallas a lot with Matt Eberflus coming back, and everybody, we got to fire Matt Eberflus. Well, what are you going to do? Who are you going to hire? You're going back to square one. You're at least further down the road. There's a lot of pieces that still need to fit into place. This is quite a drastic change. It's the 3rd defense in 3 seasons. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why you don't do that. And even going back to Robert Saleh, the defensive coordinator for the Niners, 2017, he just brings in and he rolls out the Seattle cover 3. In 2018, they start to tweak it a little bit to how their players, what their strengths are, what gives them the best opportunity. By 2019, the third year in the defense, they'd gotten kind of all their verbiage on it. We're really playing to the strengths of their players. And then that's when that defense became what that defense is today. So that's 3 years. And I just think we get so impatient today with everything. We want success immediately. So this is year 2 with Sean and Bo. I think the weird thing is both years really slow, choppy starts. And then right around this time, same thing last year. I can't remember what week it was, but we had them against Atlanta, and they whooped Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd seen them a couple of weeks prior to that against the Raiders, and was like, maybe not. But we had all the quarterbacks that were rookies last year. We even got Michael Penix late in the season when they made the change from Kirk Cousins. The only one we didn't have, obviously, was J.J. McCarthy because he got hurt. Of that class of quarterbacks at the end of the season, we all kind of talked about it a little bit. And just really when we had them from week to week after each game, we were, which one, where does he rank with the other ones that we've had? We felt Bo Nix was the best out of the group. We really did. And he's that kind of that old soul guy. I mean, he seems much more mature than he is for his age. He's played so much football at this stage of his career already at a very, very high level. So he's seen a lot, and I think it's perfect that he's with Sean. So the one thing he's got to work on is the consistency. He misses the deep ball a lot, and that's one of the big things that Sean will do. He'll kind of do that death by 1,000 cuts like Coach Caley and CJ want to do, and then he'll just nail you over the top. And we remember Breeze, right? He's just picking you apart underneath, and eventually somebody gets frustrated on the back end and is going to jump something, and then he'll just throw a dagger into your heart and hit you with something deep down the field. Bo hasn't gotten to that stage yet where he can really hurt the defense with those explosive plays down the field that you've been setting up the entire game. So once he gets to that point, and I think J.K. Dobbins has been a huge plus for him. I mean, that's been great for him. They're ahead of schedule a little bit more consistently this year. They didn't have the running game like they do this year last season. So I really, in the beginning of the year, I picked Denver to win the AFC West, to stop, Kansas City's run. I felt that they could take that step this year. It's been a little bit bumpy. They've had some games that they shouldn't have won, and they did. They've had some games they probably shouldn't have lost, and they did. But I think being at 6-2 right now is probably a fair record, because there's probably 2 games they feel lucky to have won, and probably fear there's 2 games that they gave away. So it's going to be a great game. It really is. And I think the biggest thing is you get to find out a lot about both offenses, because they're going against really, really talented defenses.
Yeah, it should be a fun one. We're really happy to have you on the broadcast again this week. Everybody tune into Fox at noon on Sunday, and it should be a fun one. Thanks.
Yeah.
Do you go by Moose or Daryl in normal conversation?
Yeah, I don't really fit the Moose moniker anymore. So
You're pretty, hey, by our age standards, you're doing pretty damn well. So thanks a lot, Daryl.
You got it.
That was awesome, Moose Johnston coming on, and thank you to him. I will tell you a quick story about my experience with the Cowboys offensive line as a rookie back when they were still at the peak of their power. Not at the peak of their powers, but they had some of those guys from those peak offensive lines. But first, Delete Me. It's important. It's important for you to protect your online data. Delete Me makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data online at a time when surveillance and data breaches are common enough to make all of us vulnerable. Data brokers make a profit off your data. Your data is a commodity, and anyone on the web can buy your private details. This can lead to identity theft, phishing attempts, and harassment. But now you can protect your privacy with Delete Me. The New York Times Wirecutter named Delete Me their top pick for data removal services. Now, don't just be out there surfing the interwebs all exposed and vulnerable. Go to Delete Me, and you can take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me now at a special discount for our viewers and listeners. Get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/pro and use the promo code PRO at checkout. It's the only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/pro. Enter the code PRO at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/pro, code pro. Larry Allen. Larry Allen was just a ridiculously strong human being, and for the you kids out there, he was the guy that just was like usually you can't like you're never going to admit to being nervous to going up against anybody. Yeah, as a NFL player, a little bit nervous to go against Larry Allen my rookie year, and I can remember I was coming outside on a stunt. The defensive end was coming inside. I was a defensive tackle. I was supposed to go outside and contain. And all I remember was just coming around and just trying to get around Larry Allen to the outside to contain. And he just hit me with his inside hand, punched me, and I went. It was like I was in a movie where I was like hurtling out of control through space. I felt like I was gonna. I felt like I wasn't ever gonna be able to stop running. It felt like it was like 10 or 15 yards that he launched me. I had some good snaps in the game, but very, very few. He was just a ridiculously strong guy, which is relevant, I think, when we're talking about the Texans' offensive line and how they're going to go against this defense, because the run game, I think, was obviously more consistent, 160 plus yards rushing they had last week, and it was useful in setting up the play action. They're going to have to try to do that against a better defense this week. The Pat Surtain thing, it is really big. We talk about FanDuel having the line set at 1.5 last week, or at the opening line. And then all of a sudden, Pat Surtain injury gets announced and it swings over to the Texans 1.5, favored by 1.5. That's not normal for a non-quarterback. And if you look at what happened last year when Riley Moss, the other starting cornerback, he got injured. And I think this is probably what the odds makers were looking at more than anything. He got injured, and he's not as good as Pat Surtain, but he's one of their starting cornerbacks. And the Broncos had to play a lot more zone than they typically do when they're blitzing and sending 5 men all the time. And they suffered for it. They ended up in 2 of the 3 games that Riley Moss was out, they allowed 30-plus points. The Browns was one of those 2 teams that scored more than 30 points. The Browns had 555 yards of offense. I haven't gone back and watched and seen exactly how that went, but I know from listening and reading people in Denver right now, they very much believe, yeah, this was a different defense last year, just when one of the starting cornerbacks was out. And they've got a lot of cornerbacks. Like they've got a lot of depth at cornerback. But Pat Surtain is that guy that can track the best receiver, allow everybody else to play a lot more aggressively. And it's interesting. I don't think it all of a sudden turns them into a bad defense. I'm guessing Vance Joseph, former Texans defensive coach, has thought about that all offseason, about how weakened they were with the loss of one of their cornerbacks. So they might be better prepared for it this time. But it's enough that I think it did tip the balance of the scales over towards the Texans side. The offense still has to prove this, though. Whether it's one injured player or 0 or anything else, they got to show that they're better than what we saw in Seattle. And I think that CJ and his development, I don't want to act like he took a giant leap forward or anything, but there was the quote by Dalton Schultz in the Albert Breer article that was real interesting to me. And I'll read it verbatim because there's a dude in here. Since he got here, dude, you give him a clean pocket and space to throw, kid's going to light it up. He's built like that. He's wired like that. He's a competitor. And I think he's come such a long way evolving his process, becoming more patient the older he gets, being willing to take a check down. He took a check down today that went for 50, where maybe the rookie CJ wouldn't have been so quick to just dump it. He's come a long way into being willing to take a good play that could turn into a great play. Where this also factors in, so he's obviously there talking about the Woody Marks play, and Moose Johnston and I talk about that as well. Moose Johnston. I feel like a lot of people forget the T in his name. Moose Johnston talked about that as well. There was also a play to Dalton Schultz where CJ got blitzed and the ball came out real quick, short of the sticks, but Dalton Schultz was able to turn it into a first down. He had another couple plays in there. The Braxton Berrios conversion on 3rd and long, that was short of the sticks. But when a team is blitzing and they're blitzing 5 or 6 guys, you've got more opportunity for run after the catch. And it doesn't have to be a deep shot. It doesn't even have to be past the sticks. There's opportunities there. And I do think that, as Moose was saying, I think that it takes a while for younger quarterbacks to really believe it. And I think CJ, coming from a situation in Ohio State where at any given time he had multiple future first rounders out on their field with him, you get an appetite for the deep ball. CJ could just wait around and wait for one of those guys to clear in the end zone. And it's always finding that balance between aggression and conservatism, that it just takes a little while. It has nothing to do with intelligence or anything else like that. It's just taking your lumps and really getting to see, and then maybe have the payoff like he did in that game last week, to really understand, all right, I don't have to always be going for it. I don't have to be so focused on the deep ball. And that hitting the check down in rhythm is a lot different than hitting the check down 2 seconds later. Because what happens is, especially on a blitz or any other time on play action, you've got guys who are at the line of scrimmage still realizing, oh, this is pass. So those guys are kind of disjointed and out of position. And then what you also have is, when you're throwing the check down in rhythm, a lot of the guys who are in coverage, they're still getting back in their drops. And when the running back catches it, or a tight end can catch it if he's not the primary target, somebody underneath catches it, they've got those defenders that would be open field tacklers still gathering in themselves to take the right angle to the ball. And that's where it just matters. It's like, it's 1 or 2 beats. But we talked about this in the offseason on the Seth Payne show a lot. I showed a couple of videos of this. When you go back and you watch Tom Brady film, which CJ did this offseason, and I went back and kind of just like did a reappraisal or a rewatch of some vintage Tom Brady stuff. It was cool how he weaponized the check down, and he looked at it very much as, look, this isn't a weapon of last resort. This is my weapon of choice versus this coverage or versus the blitz. We're going to get the ball to the running back, and he's going to have room to work, and we're going to go to town with it. So CJ's advancement, it's going to be a continual process. The one thing that people keep saying to me, remember we had Bucky Brooks on here a few weeks ago, and he talked about time and system really matters when you're doing that Josh McDaniels style of football. And CJ's now had a half season of time in system. And I think some of the things are just going to start coming more automatically, where he doesn't have to think about it. The rush defense for the Texans, because Moose mentioned the run game has really helped out Bo Nix. It's one of the reasons they're having success, is that you've got a young quarterback, but he's got a really good defense on the other side of him, and he's got a good rushing attack. J.K. Dobbins is a 3rd leading rusher in the NFL. And I know people largely don't want to believe that the Texans are a good run defense. They're the 5th best rushing defense in the NFL right now. We'll see how it ends up at the end of the year. But you look at the top of the backs that they've faced that are good backs so far. J.K. Dobbins is by far the highest ranked one. He's 3rd leading rusher in the NFL right now. You have to go down to 11th, where Travis Etienne is. They faced Travis Etienne, who's 11th, Derrick Henry, who's 12th, Christian McCaffrey, who's 13th, and Kyron Williams, who's 15th. In terms of their total yardage or where they are, they haven't been as lethal as J.K. Dobbins, but the Texans held Etienne to 3.5 yards per carry. His season average is 5.3 yards per carry. Derrick Henry, 2.2 yards per carry. His season average is 4.7. Christian McCaffrey, 3.3 yards per carry. His season average is 3.5 yards per carry. The Christian McCaffrey story this year has been mostly more about his ability as both a receiver and a rusher, and then just the volume of rushing attempts. And then Kyron Williams, they held him to 3.7 yards per carry. He averages 4.4 yards per carry. I think other than the Bucs game this year, really when D'Amico has set his mind to stopping the run, I think they've done a pretty good job of it by and large. That Bucs game freaked me out a little bit, but I feel like they rebounded from that and shored some things up. So I think that this will be a battle of defenses, and then really a prove-it game for both Bo Nix and CJ Stroud in a lot of respects. I like the Texans pass rush at home. I think that's going to be ultimately the thing that really matters. One thing that people have brought up is Bo Nix hasn't taken a lot of sacks. That doesn't worry me as much, just because the Texans, their defense has gotten a good pass rush, but they don't have a boatload of sacks. They've been pretty good and disciplined in contain rushing quarterbacks, and then it's yielded interceptions. It's yielded 3rd and longs. They've been able to get off the field a lot with a good pass rush that's putting pressure on the quarterback, but they're not necessarily getting them down on the ground as much as I know that Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter would like. But by and large, the sum total of it all is the Texans are the number 1 defense in terms of yardage and the number 1 defense in terms of points. I don't like that the standard for number 1 defense is yardage, because what the hell does that tell me? So I really like it when the defense can be both number one in yardage and number one in points. So it'd be a fun one. It's going to be a fun one. Thanks to Moose Johnston for coming on. Thanks to FanDuel for sponsoring the Believe in Texans podcast. Please like and subscribe on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple, leave a 5-star review and some nice words. That would be awesome. Really appreciate it. Everybody have a great one. We'll check back in on Monday.